Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're going to be taking a deep dive today into something super important for all you firearm owners out there in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Magazine capacity laws.
Pick one.
We're going to break them down nice and easy for you.
Make sure you're on the right side of the law.
Exactly right. Make sure you're not doing anything illegal. We're going to be taking a look at a couple of really great sources today. The first one is Magazine Capacities Explained from BC Firearms Academy.
It's a very
awesome resource. And then we're also going to be taking a look at some in-depth information from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police.
The RCMP.
Or as everyone knows them.
Yep.
The RCMP.
Yep.
We're going to get into some really interesting things today. We're even going to look at some recent changes that Bill C-21 brought about. But first, let's start with the basics. What is the law when it comes to magazine capacity in Canada?
So in Canada, we have limits on how many cartridges a magazine can hold. For handguns, it's 10 rounds max.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
10 rounds for handguns.
Yep.
But then it gets a little bit trickier with long guns.
Okay.
For most semi-automatic centerfire long guns, the limit is 5 cartridges.
Okay, so 5 for long guns. And if you go over that limit...
You're in dangerous territory.
That's a no-no.
Big no-no.
Yeah.
You're suddenly in possession of a prohibited device.
So we've got these limits. But like any law, there are exceptions.
Of course. Got to have exceptions to the rules.
So let's look at what those exceptions might be.
All right, so I've got a few categories of firearms that are exempt from these standard magazine capacity limits. One that trips a lot of people up is rimfire cartridges.
Yeah, those little guys.
So rimfire cartridges are designed a little differently than centerfire cartridges. They're generally considered less powerful.
Yeah.
Often used for target shooting or hunting small game, like your .22 caliber, for example.
Right.
So because they're not as powerful, the powers that be decided that they don't pose the same level of risk.
Makes sense. So like something like the Smith & Wesson M&P 1522.
Yes.
That comes in both rifle and pistol versions. Yeah, it comes in both.
And they're both chambered in .22 LR, which is rimfire.
Correct.
So you can have a 10-round magazine for those, no problem. But you try to slap a 25-round mag on there and, oh.
Yeah, that's when you get into trouble.
Not good.
It all comes down to the type of cartridge the magazine was designed for, not the gun itself.
Okay.
And that same rule carries over to other exceptions as well. So you mentioned historical and antique firearms.
Right.
Many of those have larger magazine capacities because that's just how they were made back then.
So like a grandfather clause.
Yeah, exactly.
But are those really any less dangerous? I mean, just because they're old?
Well, the reasoning there is that those firearms have limited functionality or are primarily collector's items.
Yeah.
They're not typically used in modern crime, so they're not seen as that big of a risk. Plus, there's that whole historical preservation aspect.
Okay, so we've got rimfire, we've got antique guns. What other exceptions are out there?
Don't forget about non-semi-automatics.
Oh, right.
Non-semi-automatic long guns.
Like bolt action and pump action. Pump action?
Yep.
Those rifles.
So those aren't subject to the same capacity limits either.
Why is that? You'd think those would be easier to use in, say, like a hunting accident.
That's a really good question. And to be honest, the reasoning isn't really clear on that one. But I suspect it's because they have a slower rate of fire.
Oh,
You have to manually cycle each round. It takes more time.
So it's not really about, like, the power necessarily. It's about limiting the rate of fire.
Exactly.
Very interesting. But now let's talk about the big one.
The elephant in the room.
Large capacity magazines.
Oh, yeah.
These are a hot topic. So what exactly is a large capacity magazine in Canada?
Any magazine that goes over those legal capacity limits that we talked about.
Yeah.
Handguns 10, semi-automatics 5.
Right.
That's considered a large capacity magazine.
Okay.
And they are strictly prohibited in Canada.
Okay, so that's pretty clear. But what about businesses? They can have these prohibited devices sometimes.
Right. So businesses with the correct licenses can possess prohibited devices like large capacity magazines.
Oh, right. But they need it for very specific reasons. So like a film company might need them as procs.
Yeah.
Or a firearms manufacturer might need them for testing. But it's not for just any business.
Right.
They need special authorization to possess those.
So individuals are out of luck.
Out of luck.
When it comes to large capacity magazines.
Yeah.
But what if you've got one and you want to make it legal? Can you do that?
Good question.
Is that even possible?
It is possible to permanently alter a large capacity magazine to comply with the law.
Okay.
But you can't just slap on a limiter. The RCMP actually has very detailed instructions on their website about the acceptable ways to do this. You got to follow those guidelines very closely.
Huh, interesting. They actually provide those instructions. It seems like they're really trying to help people follow the law.
They are. They are. However, while it is legal to alter a magazine to reduce the capacity, importing unaltered large capacity magazines is a no-no.
Okay, so you can't buy one online from another country.
Nope.
So speaking of cracking down, we got to talk about Bill C-21. Bill C-21.
This brought some changes.
Big changes.
Major changes.
So Bill C-21 came into effect in December of 2023.
Okay.
One of the biggest changes that it made was regarding those altering magazines. So it's now a criminal offense to alter a magazine to hold more than its legal capacity.
Oh, wow.
So before it might have been a slap on the wrist.
Right.
But now it's serious business.
Jail time.
Potentially.
Okay. What else did Bill C-21 change?
It also made acquiring a cartridge magazine a little bit more stringent, so now you need a valid PAL to get one. And you can't even buy one during your licensing extension period.
Wow, so they're really tightening the screws here.
Yeah, they're really trying to make sure those magazines don't fall into the wrong hands.
Right.
It doesn't stop there. Bill C-21 also made it illegal to possess or distribute blueprints or computer data for manufacturing or trafficking large capacity magazines.
Oh, wow.
So they're cutting it off at the source.
So it's not even about having the physical magazine. It's about having the information to make those magazines.
Exactly.
Wow. That's big.
It shows how seriously they're taking this issue.
Yeah.
They're really trying to come at it from every angle to protect the public.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the basic limits, the exceptions, to the Bill C-21 changes. But there's something that often causes confusion.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're going to say.
How firearm classifications play into magazine capacity.
Yes. People always get that one mixed up.
They think that the type of firearm dictates the magazine capacity. But is that true?
Not quite. So the RCMP is very clear that the maximum allowed capacity is determined by the type of firearm the magazine was designed for,
Okay.
not the firearm it's actually used in.
Okay, wait. So let's say you have a rifle that can use handgun mags. Does that mean the rifle is limited to the handgun mag capacity limit?
Yes.
Even though it's a rifle?
Yes. A perfect example of this is the Marlin Model 45,
Okay.
also known as the Camp Carbine. It's a rifle that uses magazines designed for the Colt 1911 handgun. So even though it's a rifle, it's limited to whatever is legal for the 1911. So 7 or 8 round mags are okay.
Wow. So it doesn't matter what gun you're holding. It matters what the mag was originally intended for.
Exactly. Another example that pops up is the Ruger PC carbine. It can use magazines designed for Glock and Ruger SR series handguns.
Okay.
So even though it's a rifle, you're still limited to 10 rounds.
So it's like the magazine has a passport.
It's got its own ID.
It carries its capacity with it.
Yes.
So what about when a magazine designed for one caliber might hold more rounds of a different caliber? Does that change things?
Really good question. So let's say you have a Heckler & Koch P7 pistol. It's chambered in 9mm.
Okay.
Now, a magazine designed for the .40 S&W version of that pistol can actually hold 13 rounds of 9mm.
You know, consult those great resources like BC Firearms Academy.
Absolutely.
Because these little things could make or break your compliance with the law.
For sure.
And nobody wants to end up in trouble because of a silly mistake.
Especially when it comes to firearms. You want to be extra careful. You want to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
So you've brought them up a couple of times. BC Firearms Academy. Tell us a bit more about them. What do they do?
So BC Firearms Academy, they offer a variety of online and in-person courses that can help you understand Canadian firearms law
Okay.
and make sure that you're handling firearms safely and legally.
Okay.
They have courses on a lot of different topics, from basic safety to, more complex legal issues like magazine capacity.
Like we've been talking about.
Exactly. And they even cover Bill C-21 and all of its implications.
Awesome.
So if you're looking for a great resource to learn more about Canadian firearms law, I highly recommend checking them out.
All right. So we'll make sure to leave a link for them in the show notes for anybody who's interested. Now, we've talked a lot about the Canadian laws. I'm kind of curious. Have you ever thought about how our regulations compare to other countries?
That's a great question. I think it's always important to have a global perspective on these types of issues. Each country has its own approach to firearm regulations.
Right.
And those approaches are often influenced by, a variety of factors like their history, their culture, their current political climate.
Right.
So some countries might have stricter regulations than Canada.
Okay.
Others might have more relaxed regulations.
And the reasons for that could be super interesting to explore,
Yeah, for sure.
like crime rates or political ideologies or even hunting traditions.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that there are always multiple perspectives on complex issues like gun control. And I think it's really valuable to try to understand those different viewpoints.
Okay, so that's a lot to take in for now.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
A lot of information. I think we should give our listeners a little bit of time to digest this.
Definitely.
Think about it.
Take a break.
We've gone over a lot of the ins and outs, all the exceptions. Bill C-21.
Yeah. We talked about the importance of responsible gun ownership, making sure you understand why these regulations exist.
Exactly. And remember, if you're ever uncertain about a particular rule or regulation, always go to a good source. You can check the RCMP website or talk to a firearms instructor.
Definitely.
Someone who really knows. So when we come back, we're going to be continuing this conversation. We're going to examine some specific examples
Oh, yeah.
that illustrate just how these regulations work.
And nitty-gritty.
Exactly. Real-world examples can be super helpful. So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay safe.
And keep those questions coming. We'll be back soon to dive even deeper into this fascinating world of Canadian firearms regulations.
See you next time.
Bye for now. All right, so welcome back, everyone. We just had a great discussion on kind of the basics of Canadian magazine capacity laws. And now we're going to get into some real-world scenarios
Oh, yeah.
to really illustrate how these regulations work in practice. So kind of connect all those dots.
Also, I love getting into the details.
Make sure you really understand the nitty-gritty.
It's like seeing the law come to life.
Exactly. So we mentioned before the Marlin Model 45.
Right.
Ruger PC carbine.
Yeah.
So those are both rifles that can actually accept handgun magazines.
And the magazine carries its capacity with it,
It does.
regardless of what firearm it's in.
Correct.
So even though they're rifles, they're limited to those handgun magazine capacities.
Exactly.
That's another one that's kind of confusing for people.
It is, and it just shows how important it is to really have clear communication and education about these laws, because it's not always super intuitive, and that's why those resources like BC Firearms Academy are so crucial,
Yep.
To make sure people have that accurate and up-to-date information.
Yeah, they seem to really do a good job of breaking things down
They
in a
do.
way that's really easy to understand, which is so important.
It is.
When you're dealing with something this complex.
Especially with laws and regulations.
And it's not just about avoiding legal trouble, Understanding these laws, it's really about promoting a culture of safety and responsible gun ownership.
Exactly. It's about being a responsible member of that firearms community.
Right.
And really contributing to a safer environment for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we move on to the next part, what are some key takeaways from this part? What do we want people to remember?
Well, I think the biggest one is to remember that Canadian magazine capacity laws are designed to keep the public safe.
Okay.
Whether that's limiting the capacity of handguns to 10 rounds or prohibiting those large capacity magazines, those regulations are in place for a reason.
So it's not enough to just be aware of the general rules.
It's not.
You really got to do your research.
You do.
You got to seek guidance from reputable sources.
Yes.
Like you said, BC Firearms Academy.
Exactly.
Stay informed about any updates or changes to the law.
Absolutely.
So it's about taking ownership of your knowledge
It is.
and being proactive about ensuring your compliance.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay, so now before we wrap this section up, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Okay.
We focused a lot on the, specific Canadian laws. But have you ever thought about the philosophy behind magazine capacity limits?
That's an interesting question. What do you mean?
So we've discussed the practical reasons,
Right.
reduce potential harm.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a deeper question there about the balance between individual rights and collective safety.
I see what you're getting at. It's that age-old question that societies all over the world are grappling with.
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line between personal freedom and the need to protect the well-being of the community?
Exactly. And when it comes to firearms,
Yeah.
that line can be extra complex
Oh, for sure.
and contentious.
Yeah. A lot of debate.
So it's a discussion that deserves careful consideration,
Absolutely.
respectful dialogue.
For sure.
Okay, well, I think that's a great place to leave it for now.
Yeah.
Give everyone something to think about.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
From the practicalities of the Canadian magazine capacity laws
Mhm.
to some of those broader philosophical questions that they raise.
Exactly. And we really emphasize the importance of responsible gun ownership, continuous learning,
Yes,
seeking out reliable information like BC Firearms Academy.
absolutely.
So when we come back, we're going to continue exploring this topic. We're going to be looking at some specific scenarios that often cause confusion or debate
Ooh, I love those.
within the firearms community.
The ones that really make you think.
Exactly. So until next time, stay safe, stay informed.
And keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
See you soon for the final part of our deep dive.
Can't wait.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive on Canadian magazine capacity laws. Man, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We really have. It's been a wild ride. From basic definitions to exceptions. Even got into some philosophy there at the end.
We sure did. And all those little details really matter, eh?
It really goes to show you why being a responsible gun owner means going beyond just a basic understanding of the law. You got to dig deeper, ask questions, find those good sources of info.
And speaking of good sources, can't forget about BC Firearms Academy.
Oh, yes, they're fantastic.
They really are. If you want to make sure you're on the right side of the law, those courses they offer are top-notch for getting that in-depth knowledge.
Absolutely. Whether it's basic safety stuff or more complex things like we've been discussing, magazine capacity, Bill C-21, they break it all down so it's easy to understand. And that's so important with regulations like these.
So we're wrapping up our deep dive here, but before we go, I want to leave everyone with a final thought. We've talked a lot about the what and the why of magazine capacity laws, but let's think about the so what.
Good point. What does it all mean for the everyday firearm owner in Canada?
At the end of the day, I think it comes down to this. Understanding and following these laws isn't just about staying out of trouble. It's about being a responsible part of the firearms community, contributing to a culture of safety and respect.
Couldn't agree more. It's about protecting ourselves and everyone around us. It shows that we take gun ownership seriously and are committed to using them safely.
That's what it's all about, eh? A society where we can enjoy firearms safely and responsibly, without putting our communities at risk.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So to everyone listening, stay curious, stay informed, and above all, stay safe. And hey, don't forget, BC Firearms Academy is there to help you every step of the way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, folks. Until next time.